So this is a review for Feed the Kitty, and with me today, I first of all have Marc Anthony, Manny, Cruz, the Toonie Tenor. I even have Pussyfoot as well.
That was really good.
That was Matt Hunter. I guess I'm the housewife, so there you go.
Yeah.
So all three here, all that mouse that we'll discuss later on. So as mentioned, this is Feed the Kitty, released on the 2nd of February 1952. It had a Blue Ribbon reissue sometime in 1961. It's the 640th in the series, and it's directed by, who else? Chuck Jones. So this cartoon's very obscure, no one's ever seen it, it's lost media, no, a kid of course. It's on the Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 1 DVD set, and then they've remastered it again in high definition on the Looney Tunes Platinum Collection Volume 1, and it looks fantastic, I have to say.
Yeah.
So this particular short, I think just about everyone's seen it, but in case you haven't, I can't show you the full cartoon here due to copyright on YouTube, but basically, you see a dog, Marc Antony, he encounters a cute kitten, and after a while he decides to adopt it, but thinks the owner won't want it, so he does clever things to hide the fact that he has adopted a kitten. So it's very straightforward, but yeah, we'll discuss it as we go along.
Now I have seen everything.
In terms of trivia, this is the first appearance of Marc Antony and Pussyfoot in a short, and this is perhaps the most well-known short. I'm sure we can agree that's the case. This is perhaps the most well-known one, and they would appear again in Kiss Me Cat and Feline Frame Up, and Pussyfoot would reappear in Cat Feud, and I think there's even a redesign there too.
Well, Cat Feud is Marc Anthony. It's just a redesign of him for lower budgets at the time, and he's gray in that one. He's less jowly looking. It's the same character. It's just a redesign that nobody really liked and doesn't really remember.
Hey, exactly, because this is so well remembered. In fact, in 1994, this was voted number 36 of the 50 best shorts of all time, and I have my opinions on this short, but I definitely can agree that it definitely belongs on a list of best shorts of all time. There's no question there. So I think that's a very good placement. And in fact, this short is so well known. If you've seen Monsters, Inc., the director Pete Docter intentionally used the whole cookie scene, which we will discuss, in the garbage scene where Sully thinks Boo is getting, I guess,
crushed in the trash compactor. Yeah,
exactly.
And then you were saying that there were some references in Joe Dante's films as well.
Yeah, like in one film, I think there was like the toy car that we see in this short as well. He reviews the short so much that he uses it in a lot of his films, and look, I don't blame him. It's actually a very touching, very sweet short, and it's appropriate as well because Matt, you own cats, as well as me, and Manny, you own dogs. Sorry, I got to say dog.
Yeah,
you're barking up the wrong tree. That's what you're doing.
It's a cartoon that I think if you're not an animal lover, you probably don't get as much appreciation for it as if you are. If you've ever raised a kitten, which I have, it's very accurate, and it's just perfect in that way. Chuck Jones was an animal lover, no question, and it's definitely a love letter to animal lovers. It's funny because Chuck Jones did not intend for it to be as cute and touching as it really is. He was going for outright laughs, but because of the emotional roller coaster that Marc Anthony goes through, it's genuinely touching. If you've ever seen it with an audience that has never seen it, I encourage you to try and find a way to do so, because I saw it with an audience like that at a museum several years ago, probably about 8 or 9 years ago before my mother passed away. She and I went to an exhibit it was a history of the Warner Studio in one enchilada. And at the very end of the exhibit, there was a screening room where you could sit and watch a loop of Chuck Jones cartoons. And I remember this was one of them. And I remember my mother had never seen it. And some of the other people in the room hadn't seen it either. And there were both laughs and tears from everybody. And it's just a fantastic experience to watch it with somebody who's never seen it. And I think we're all jaded because we've seen it so many times. It's been released to DVD, I think, more than any other Warner cartoon almost. It was one of the first. And it's been remastered multiple times. It's been on everybody's history list as one of the best, and for good reason.
Yeah, exactly. And you were mentioning about seeing it with people who haven't seen it before. In my case, my kids, of course, they hadn't seen it. And I sat down and watched it with them, and They went through the same amount of emotions as you mentioned. They were laughing at some of the bits, and of course they were sad at the end as well. In fact, there is a theme park here in Australia called Movie World that has a Looney Tunes section, and one of the toys is Pussyfoot. They actually sell it there, and my daughter actually wanted to buy one, and she still has it today as a result. This is one of her favorite shorts. She absolutely adores it. And as a pet owner, I can definitely relate to a lot of it, and I've also raised kittens too. And the best thing, of course, is seeing, I guess you Americans say, making biscuits when the cat is clawing. You guys, I think that's what you
Yep.
guys say. I don't know what our
Oh.
equivalent would be. I think Maddie's going to probably say playing the didgeridoo or some really weird. That
You
makes
read
absolutely
my
no sense.
mind.
Yeah. No,
Throw the old boomerang. I don't know.
Yeah, the cat's
Well,
throwing the
yeah.
boomerang over there. Yeah,
where they get on your shoulder and they claw you like that.
Yeah,
They need
exactly.
you. Yeah. But
feeling
that's
of motherhood kind of thing.
but that's something that Chuck Jones obviously got really accurate. That's how you know when somebody knows the animal. They know how that animal behaves. And Chuck Jones was definitely one of those people that kind of did his research, and he knew. Put that in there. It's a little subtle thing. But we pick up on it because we're like, oh, that's what a kitten does. That's how he behaves.
Exactly. And Mark Antony, of course, is my face when my now grown up cats claws my leg like that. That's pretty much my face there. But we've been talking about cats here, but what about dogs? How does the expressions of this dog come across to you as a dog owner?
I don't think my dog Nina is nearly as expressive as Mark Anthony. But there one scene in particular, and it's funny because it's like a dog doing it to a cat, but the scene when Mark Anthony starts reprimanding Pussyfoot, he goes, just Pussyfoot's freaking adorable. And then he starts hugging him, kissing Pussyfoot. And I'm like, you don't know how many times I've done that before to my dog, too. She peed over here or she chewed up a toy. And then she just does something so cute. And you're like, come here, I love you so much. And you start hugging her. And I'm like, as a dog owner, I've done that tons of times where it's like, no, I'm supposed to put my foot down. But man, you're so adorable. I just want to give you a hug and an extra belly rub. And like some other things too, just the second you see a cat, a lot of times with my dogs that I've had over the years, like, hey, you want to go outside? You want to go outside? And you get excited, whatever. And I let them outside, and you're thinking, oh, yeah, going to find a spot, do their bathroom business. No, boom, bolting out of the house like a bat out of hell just to bark at the cats. And that's exactly that, where it's just boom, Mark Anthony. And of course, Mel Blanc with his amazing dog effect. And there's so many expressions that Mark Anthony does in this cartoon, but just his expression when he's just snarling and barking at Pussyfoot, and it's just nothing happening. Pussyfoot, she's just, oh, whatever. I'm gonna clean myself. I'm over here in my own world, like cats usually do, because I've never owned a cat. So obviously, you guys will have to school me on the cat business. But I've seen that plenty of times where you talk to a cat, or you interact with a cat, and the cat's, I don't care, dude. I'm here cleaning myself. Whatever.
I'll come to you in my own time.
Exactly.
That's what
you are inconveniencing me, human. And obviously you guys are biased towards cats. I'm biased towards dogs, but the beauty of this cartoon, like what you guys were saying, it's people who don't own pets will be affected by this cartoon because, and Matt, I think you mentioned it, that Jones did not intend this to be a sentimental story. But it's everything. It's the voice acting from Mel Blanc, the music that Carl Stalling puts in after he thinks that Pussyfoot's been made into a cookie. And just that you could also think of someone you love, someone in your family, your significant other. Like if something bad happened to them, the joy and relief that you get when you realize, oh my God, you're okay. It's one of those stories that it doesn't matter the circumstance, but it just has that extra special layer of sweetness because it's of a dog and a cat, the two most popular pets in the world. One of the dogs in my family, Bear, he's turning 12 next month in September. He's elderly. You see it in his expression, his looks, and he lives with my brother. But whenever he sees me, he becomes a puppy again because he grew up with me when he used to live with me. And it's just that energy comes back and that love and affection. And someone who's never had a dog or a cat, when your pet passes away or something happens to it, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just a stupid animal, whatever.
There's a bond. Absolutely.
Yeah. They say like when your pet dies, it's like you feel the same pain if it's someone in your immediate family.
Yeah. The dog I grew up with, I was the last person to see her alive. And that was crazy. They give you that look. They have dogs in particular. They have a way of looking at you that it's like a connection Anybody who's never had a dog doesn't understand. You're talking about with Mark Antony, the expressions that he gives, they're very much dog-like, but they're human as well. And Chuck Jones, apparently he talks about it in one of his books. He talks about filling wastebaskets with drawings of it because he went to such great lengths to get his expressions for Mark Antony just perfect. And the idea was he was trying to be funny. He was trying to make it the funniest he could. And what he actually ended up doing was making it touching. And if you've ever seen it with people, it makes people cry.
I've seen it multiple times, and I start welling up with it. I can't think of another. Okay, maybe one other cartoon I could think of that hits me on an emotional level like that is the ending of What's Opera Doc. Like it's just also musically it hits me on another level, but like this cartoon, you feel it like the urge of tearing up and everything, and I'm like, from a cartoon about a kitten and a bulldog. Oh,
Huh.
and speaking of expression, but after Pussyfoot, what do you guys call it? Making the biscuits. See, you could tell I'm not a cat person, but right after he does it for the first time, I'm looking at that face and just that sly, slick, half eye closed smile that Mark Anthony makes. That's my favorite expression in the entire cartoon.
I do have to ask though, when Nina's trying to hide if she's accidentally done her business or whatever, does she do that kick dance that Mark Antony does later on in the short when he's trying to hide?
Well, either that or she runs off and she decides to start using a powder puff to make herself look prettier. But no, her go-to usually is I'll go up to her and I'll see if she pees out of her wee wee pad or whatever. I'm like, Nina, did you pee out of your wee wee pad? And instantly she just stops what she's doing and she rolls over on her back and shows her belly. And I'm like, no, I know what you're trying to do. You want a belly rub. You're not getting a belly rub right now.
That's
Yeah,
right.
she's a sucker for belly rubs.
Yeah, and speaking of the facial expressions, some of my favorites, and probably my favorite is when he realizes he's grabbed the woman's leg, and then he's like, whoops. and of course, the whole not me face as well. Man, I'm just looking at all these faces. Pretty much to pad out this review, I'm going to actually have probably still images of all the expressions because it's like countless in this short. And I'm sure we can all agree the best scene in this short has to be the cookie scene, though.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Especially all the facial expressions, even in that one, just the despair, and I like how they added in there because they're obviously a story. I don't want to say problem, but they have to resolve something in the story where it's okay. We need to show that Pussyfoot's okay. So how do we do that? So of course they have that ridiculous thing of the dog just make himself look to be rabid.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. And obviously, it's even funnier because the housewife immediately doesn't freak out and think mad dog. She goes, "Oh, my whipped cream."
Yeah.
Who's really an underrated actress, I think, was never credited in these cartoons. She does a fantastic job in this one as the housewife. And again, Mark Antony is thinking, "Oh, I'm going to scare her and make her think I'm a rabid dog." And she's, "Oh, my whipped cream."
Oh, my whipped cream. That's the last straw.
And that not only is funny, but also serves a purpose. So she's like, all right, out you go kind of thing. And then you can see Pussyfoot get out. And of course, Mark Antony doesn't know this. And just his despair.
She's never seen the kitten, and he doesn't see her or him. I guess Pussyfoot is a him. The later cartoons address him as a him. He's often mistaken as a her. It's like a Tweety situation, but Pussyfoot is a male cat. But anyway, we see him escape the mixer, and neither the housewife nor Mark Antony do. The audience does.
And that's why it works so well. And the expressions on Mark Antony is like how he's going to faint. And he's like, oh no, my mistress is torturing this poor cat. Oh no. And then, of course, the ultimate long face, right? And he's, oh, don't you want the cookie? And of course, what shape is this particular cookie?
The cookie's cat shape.
And then just his despair, and then of course when he hears the cat, it's just the joy in his face. And this is going to segue into the music, but Carl Starling, my goodness, he knew how to tug at the heartstrings in that final scene. Just the choice of music.
It.
Looking at it now, it's the scene where Mark Anthony just slowly puts his hand up and takes the cookie and then puts the cookie on his back and starts just sobbing. And just for that brief moment, you feel as sad as he does. And then, of course, the kitten show up and he's overjoyed. But that one scene where he's reaching for that cookie that she's handing him, and it's just, damn.
Exactly. Carl Starling definitely knows how to tug at the heartstrings there. Manny, what music does he do in that scene?
During that scene, it's called the Maiden's Prayer. And the name of the composer, I'm probably going to say it incorrectly. The last name is Bada Bar Barazuska. Badrazuska. It's a composer I've never heard of before, actually. Badger Mole, my Avatar reference. Yes, Manny, you're a hack. There you go. All right. I was assuming it was a Polish name, and I was correct. So it looks like Tekla Badrazuska. Yeah, someone's gonna chew me apart, deservedly. This is actually a composer I've never heard of. It was a Polish composer and pianist, and she composed for the piano. And the Maiden's Prayer, or A Maiden's Prayer, is her most famous composition, written or published in 1856. For some reason, I thought it was called something else. I would not called something else, but I was thinking, is this a piece from Mendelssohn or whatever? But this is a composer that I've never heard of, and I'm actually pretty happy to look into this now. Maybe a new edition of Manny's Music Time for Feed the Kitty. It's so beautiful to hear it played on the violin when he thinks that Pussyfoot's been turned into a cookie.
Whenever you talk about that stuff, Manny, it's always amazing to me just what an encyclopedia of music that Carl Stalling was. Just how many pieces of music that he knew and knew what to use in certain scenes. And there's things that was like, oh, he probably composed that for the scene. And then you're like, no, he was pulling from a classical piece from a composer that nobody's ever heard of these days. It's like, how did he know all that? It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, one thing we've never heard of is Shortnin Bread when she's cooking.
Yeah,
how many times
hearing
have
the
they
whole
used that old chestnut? But anyway,
Oh, yeah.
and even still to this day, I forgot which one of the new Looney Tunes cartoons, but I was watching one of them a while back, and I heard "Shortning Bread" being played in the background of that cartoon. I was like, "Wow, that song still carries it still has life." It's like one of the go-to pieces of music in animation.
Yeah.
We think of Powerhouse, we think of "Shortening Bread," we think of the William Tell Overture, and it's still
California, Here We Come, whenever there's
California,
a train.
Here I Come. And speaking of the new Looney Tune cartoons, they just released the final batch.
There is a Mark Antony and Pussyfoot cartoon,
Yep,
and it's
that's
very, very good. It's like they go to the pet hotel.
Okay.
So Pussyfoot wants to be with Mark Antony, and the pet hotel is segregated between dogs and cats. Pussyfoot wants to hang out with his pal, and he shows up in the dog section of the boarding place, and Mark Antony keeps trying to hide him from the other dogs. It's actually pretty good.
wow, gotta definitely check that out.
The opening titles looks like has a song called Chitterlin Switch. You hear Sleep Baby Sleep from an unknown composer. Perpetual Motion, which is a piece from Johann Strauss. I believe that's in the scene where Pussyfoot's inside a little motorized car. You hear Three Little Kittens. Wow, shocker. And like I said, Shortening Bread and the Maiden's Prayer. But, of course, the leitmotif or the motive for Pussyfoot is
Now, maybe I can get something accomplished.
Ain't She Sweet? Dun, dun.
Which
And
is why
like
I
you,
think a lot of people mistake her for a female kitten, even though it's later identified to be a male kitten.
I think in this short, it was just left open, just to whatever, and then maybe later on they just decided to settle that little debate. We'll let people in the comment section let us know what they think anyway. So I think that will be an interesting discussion point for them.
This actually ended up launching 3 or 4 other cartoons. It's the best remembered out of them, and Feline Frame Up is one of my favorite Warner Brothers cartoons of all time. Certainly one of my favorite Chuck Jones cartoons. I think it's perfect. I think it's a lot funnier than this one, but I think it's really charming that Chuck Jones was going for just gut laughs in this, and he ended up making it an emotional roller coaster. It was unintended, but it's just something that doesn't happen very often. And that's why it's such a classic, is because we actually emotionally feel what's going on in this cartoon.
The short comes across to me as a full circle thing for Chuck. I know you mentioned that this was intended to be one of those gut laughing shorts. Watching these in order, Chuck Jones started off trying to imitate Disney, and there wasn't many laughs per se. A lot of it was just incredibly cutesy. He then admitted later on he learned how to be funny, and that was seen in shorts like The Dover Boys and The Draft Horse. And of course, he became more in line with the other directors' sensibilities and that sort of thing. But here, it feels like he's got that nice balance of what he started with, cutesy Disney-esque sort of stuff, and the Warner Brothers style. Yeah, it may have been unintentional, but it just feels like it's just a full circle for Chuck.
At this point, he's gotten so much better at the facial expressions and the timing and all of that. As much emotion as there is, there's also a lot more humor than you get in some of his earlier stuff, like with Sniffles and that Tom Thumb in Trouble cartoon that's just straight up a Disney thing. But this one is definitely Chuck Jones with all he's learned, and he's yet doing some of the stuff he started out doing. So it's a balance. It's a nice balance, and it works.
Exactly right, because you've got one of the saddest third acts in Looney Tunes history, of course, and all the cutesy cat and all that, but then you got those wonderful gags like how there really is a mouse in this house, and the mouse is just looking all puzzled as Mark Antony's walking along, and then once he realizes it, looks at the mouse, and the mouse just gives him a kiss. That was funny. Is it the greatest joke ever? No, but we get a nice balance of that kind of humor and, of course, the wonderful cutesy sensibilities. And now our good friend John is going to give his thoughts on this short. So, take it away, John.
Hello, it's me again, John. And today I'm gonna talk about Feed the Kitty as well and give my quick thoughts on this cartoon. So, first of all, I really like the main characters on the short, Mark Anthony and Pussyfoot. I really like their dynamic, and I think it's very funny to see how a big dog really cares about a small kitten. And this is really established with the first scene showing its eyes and then revealing itself out of the can, and then Marc Anthony coming to try to scare it away but doesn't work. I really like that opening scene that establishes both characters. Then there are also a few funny gags that I find through the cartoon, like when Marc Anthony tries to doing this, moving the finger. I really like that. Or also some of the gags of Marc Anthony trying to hide Pussyfoot from the owner, portraying that Pussyfoot is a toy, the scene where Pussyfoot is in the car. But then comes my favorite scene on the entire short, which is the scene of the cookie, where Marc Anthony hides Pussyfoot in the flour to make cookies, and Marc Anthony is kicked out of the house, and Pussyfoot does get out of that, but Marc Anthony doesn't know, and we see the cookies being made with Marc Anthony thinking Pussyfoot is in there, and just look at the reactions of Marc Anthony in all those scenes. I love those reactions of him looking at the window and falling away every time he sees the cookies being made, like thinking the cat is there. And then is the ending where he's back again in the house with a face full of tears, and the owner gives him the cookie with the form that looks like Pussyfoot, and he's just broken. I really like that frame of Marc Anthony with the side eyes because it's almost like cruel. Oh, come on, Chuck, why you had to do this? Which also explains why people cried when this cartoon premiered. But then Pussyfoot appears, it's all fine. But yeah, it's a really cute cartoon, I really like it. I understand why people really like this short, because of the bond both Marc Anthony and Pussyfoot have. And this is something that you're gonna see later on the following shorts, Kiss Me Cat, Feline Frame Up, and Cat Feud. But those will come another day. And another part of this cartoon is that dialogue isn't essential to it. It's a more visual type of short, because both Marc Anthony and Pussyfoot don't have dialogue outside of their cat and dog sounds. So that's another thing that I consider to be a highlight of this short. But honestly, I will give this cartoon a 10 out of 10. It's one of the greatest Looney Tunes shorts and the beginning of two of the best supporting players in the Looney Tunes lineup. And can't wait to see them next time on the next cartoon, Kiss Me Cat. So until then, I'll see you all later. Goodbye.
I reckon rating time, guys.
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Absolutely.
Yep, you're gonna give 9 out of 10. What about the dog lover over
The
there?
dog love over here. Maybe I should take a point off because I'm not the biggest fan of cats. You know what? The 10 out of 10. Absolute masterpiece. Again, I do have the bias of being a dog lover, but even as someone who I don't care for cats, but they're pets. I get it. Just this every time I watch this cartoon, it tugs in the heartstrings. Absolutely hilarious. The musical stuff that Carl Stalling did, not just only in the cues, but the way that he arranged and orchestrated some of the parts. And also got to give credit to Milt Franklin for that. But in particular, I'm thinking of when he puts the powder puff on his face and you hear, "Oh, you beautiful doll, you," and you hear a celeste playing it, or of course the Maiden's Prayer playing on a violin as opposed to a piano. And I forgot to mention it before, but you guys were saying that Chuck was firing on all cylinders. But you also don't forget, you got to give credit just the brilliant writing of Mike Maltese. And I'm looking at the animators, Ken Harris, Phil Monroe, Lloyd Vaughn, and Benny Washam, and just how they were able to take those sketches that Chuck did and just beautifully implement them onto the screen itself. I had a list of my top 10 favorite Warner Brothers cartoons. And after watching this one again for the rewatch, I'm like, this belongs in my top 10. Why have I not put this in there? This is an absolute classic. One of the best the studio's ever made, hands down.
So, my thing with this short is, first of all, I'll give it 9.5 out of 10. It is a masterpiece, so let's get that part out of the way. It is one of those films that's just perfect from start to finish. The only reason I'm not giving it 10 is because it's not a go too short for me. For whatever reason. It's like, gasp, I know. It's probably the way you, Manny, feel with One Froggy Evening and Porky Wacky Land, where I appreciate this short. If it's on, I'll watch it. I've shown it to my kids and all that stuff, but it's not a short that I go to. It's similar. I used to use the film Casablanca as an example. It's a masterpiece. I even own it on 4K. It is magnificent, but is it a go-to film for me? No. But anyway, 9.5. But it's a masterpiece, and everyone should watch this short. And it deservedly belongs on the top 50 shorts of all times list. Absolutely. It belongs there. It's just a personal preference, that's all. So, there we go. So I think that'll do it for this one. So thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, take care.
There you go. That's better. Now I want some cookies.